There's a good lesson in there for us boys. Be more cringe on the potty.
Do not tell me that you haven't been singing this to yourself and getting jiggy with it. Structure achieves strategy. Time and time again, you get the right people in the right structure. That's when you get to achieve your strategy, where too often people concentrate too much on vision and mission and all of those buzzwords that make us feel good, but then don't have the right structure in place.
There's no good news, there's no bad news, there just is news. And when you have that lens with your updates and understanding that even if there is bad news to share, your investors have a vested interest in helping you solve those problems.
That is bang on. And despite me saying to myself, like time and time again, that life and business doesn't grow in a straight line and it's linear, I still catch myself defaulting back to that and have to then remind myself every single time.
I love the way companies try and spin this bullshit. There's the other group of still, I haven't hit my head against the wall enough. I haven't caused myself and those around me enough pain. I'm going to continue to do the thing that the world demonstrates not to reward, but I'm special.
Do we do our own Canva's enterprise?
Shout out to Capital Brief. This week, it's been an easy place to mine for great articles because they're really covering the...
Don't we have anything to talk about without them?
No.
Quality journalism.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, boys.
How are we?
Really bloody good. Feeling pumped after the offsite.
Yeah, no, that was good. Jack survived the caravan of courage with me.
So good. It's so good to be back out there on the farm. Just something, it's a stunning property and we're good humans.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the weather was pretty good to us. There was a point where we thought we were going to get huge amounts of rain, which is normally the tribe style, but it was good. And we even had the ability to have an awesome campfire down by the creek, which I think was a highlight for people.
Yeah, I think we totally scored it with the weather and such a better time of year compared to the sauna end of Jan.
What were you ever thinking doing it in end of Jan?
The theory was start of year.
Here we go. Here we go. The education comes.
Absolutely. Set yourself up for the start of the year, end of Jan, post Australia Day. That was the theory, but you ended up sweating too much to actually do anything.
Yeah, you couldn't be present or enjoy it because you hadn't got any sleep and it was disgusting.
Exactly. Anyway, this time of year worked much better.
What were some of our key takeaways and reflections?
I think for me, it's, Don, when you step through the Adesi's model, like the combination of PAEI and life cycles in the context of people to roles. And you look around the room and you see everyone's face just with that, now I understand why I felt that pain with that hire and trying to get a fish to climb a tree. And I think that for me is always, when you understand those models, it gives you so much clarity retrospectively, but then also how to move forward. And I think for me, that's always a highlight, just seeing people benefit from that.
Yeah. For a quick overview, PAEI, you got to produce, you got to administrate, you got to entrepreneur, and you got to integrate. There's 4 roles. Producing and administrating are your short-term effective and efficient, and entrepreneuring and integrating are your long-term effective and efficient. And so your organization has to balance and create those ingredients of producing results customers want, administrating, so you have systems and process, entrepreneuring, so you have new products and new innovations coming through, and integrating so you can keep people together and you can get vision and mission from within. But then you also use it for styles. There are producers. These are high intensity people that like to get stuff done. There are administrators. These are the quieter folk who are all about rules and process and controls and just trying to make it efficient. And there are entrepreneurs that are about creativity, new ideas and new products and new markets and exuberance that few other people have. And then there are integrators who bring people together. And you can match role and style. If you put a high A person in charge of E functions, it's going to be a disaster. So it's about being able to create a systemic methodology to say, okay, my organization needs to produce, administrate, entrepreneur, integrate. So producing roles are like sales, operations, administrating roles are like accounting and finance and HR administration. E roles, entrepreneurial roles, new product development, marketing, financing, and integration is really about the culture and climate and human development. And so you can then match personality styles to that. So make sure the roles have the right style of people. And
Yeah. And also when startups start to grow and they start hiring, particularly salespeople and sales managers from later stage organization. When I say later stage, I mean in the terms of the Adesi's life cycle. And on the way you help founders understand the frustration that they might then feel or why that might not be effective. It's really valuable. And you can see the founders just have that dawning realization of why a particular hire didn't work out in the past.
Yeah. And I think it's good. We spend quite a bit of time just helping them design their own structure, because structure achieves strategy. Time and time again, you get the right people in the right structure. That's when you get to achieve your strategy, where too often people concentrate too much on strategy and vision and mission and all of those buzzwords that make us feel good, but then don't have the right structure in place, or don't have the right people, or have the right people in the wrong structure, or vice versa, and everything falls down. Whereas too often founders are told, oh, have energy and passion and vision. And yeah, you need that, but it's not sufficient.
A takeaway, or maybe just a good reminder, was the importance of in real life events. So like Zoom's a great tool, but we can't substitute it. And I think for portfolio and even potential portfolio, just a great reminder how good it is spending time in real life.
Yeah, such a good point. And especially, yeah, you've got to get the physicality of getting out of day-to-day business and away from other distractions. And as much as possible, we try and orchestrate these things to suspend reality, to remove any sort of decision fatigue, where everyone gets fed, they're told where they need to be, when they need to be there, and they can just be present in the moment. It's so valuable.
For me, the other little reflection is the room split a little bit into sort of groups. Like there were the founders in the companies that were willing to accept the word focus, and that were concentrating on small groups of ideal clients, solving one problem, delivering a really focused solution, and being really great at that. And they tended to have an easier time with how they were achieving results. And then the other half of the room couldn't control that entrepreneurial impulse and was just all about, yeah, but I solve lots of problems and I can deliver lots of solutions and I can simultaneously go after multiple markets. And then those groups then split again into the group that went, oh, hang on a minute, success leaves clues. I can see why I need to change my focus. And then there's the other group of still, I haven't hit my head against the wall enough. I haven't caused myself and those around me enough pain. I'm going to continue to do the thing that the world demonstrates not to reward, but I'm special. I don't know if that's too aggressive.
It is what it is. Very true.
And then another group, it's just an easier life when you provide a direct outcome. Customer has this problem and I directly solve it. People that have a harder life are the indirect solvers. Customers have these problems, and then if you use my thing and a few more steps and do a few other things, the indirect outcome is this result that's really hard to link back. It's really hard to measure. That's another sort of separation of two groups. And as much as possible, if you're in the latter category of providing an indirect outcome or an indirect solution, you've really got to work to try and make your product more direct in order to have an easier life. And then life cycle. I think life cycle is always a good one, where the people that were having an easier time were doing things and solving problems related to their life cycle. They weren't at a certain phase of the life cycle and then trying to do things that were 5 steps away from the life cycle. And the analogy is a bit like, notwithstanding what we think of politicians, an infant and a toddler shouldn't try and run for prime minister. Like an adult is supposed to run for prime minister. You're supposed to link where you are in the life cycle, and organizations that are still at infancy or even the toddler go-go stage, trying to pull off products or pull off markets or pull off things that actually required adult level of strength, control, predictability, experience, safety. They were just trying to skip too many steps. Whereas the sequence is you've got to get through that infancy phase and you've got to work with customers and markets and products that are willing to accept infancy phase, then get into toddler phase and work with products and markets and people that are willing to accept toddler phase, and then move into it's a stepping stone. Whereas people that have given birth to something that they wanted to be an adult tomorrow, they also struggle.
I think the other reflection on the weekend for me is we always manage to get just really bloody good humans at the offsite. And it was really nice catching up with everyone, getting to know people there we didn't know, but the people we did know, getting to know them even more. And looking forward to the monthly catch-ups. So already counting down to our first one, which will have to be, late June. We get back from UK.
So the next one is 4th to 26th of September.
That's the one. So the details for that are already up on the site. It is a register your interest form that's up there. So if you are interested in coming along to the next one, get your registration in early because they do tend to fill very quick.
Let's just do a little bit of recapping on top of the government's plan to not only increase the sophisticated investor test, they're going to tax unrealized capital gains inside super funds.
Yeah.
So if you get onto a winner, and let's say you invest $100,000 in your super, and the next time they do a round that values your shares at $1 million, the government then wants to tax you $300,000, or no, roughly, even though you haven't got any money. So it would mean that you would have to try and sell other assets in order to fund that tax.
There is so much discussion of potential changes to tax treatment, to thresholds for investment. Like there is so much uncertainty. It's creating uncertainty in the market for investors.
But on Friday, I spoke to one of our investors. I said, just out of interest, because I knew he had done at least a couple of investments from his super fund. If this comes in, does this stop you? He said, probably, because super fund money in his mind is only accessible 30 years from now, so he can take a long-term view. The thought of the compliance and the admin, and suddenly you have a unrealized capital gain, and then I'm going to go and sell other things that I don't want to sell to go and pay the tax office money. And keep in mind with this asset class, how many times do we see companies that raise at a higher value only to go to zero?
Yeah.
So you've paid out a whole lot of tax. Like we've said it before, the government tends to have sexy fingers, which means everything they touch, they fuck. And they're getting sexier.
It's a good way of putting it.
Now, another thing from a previous episode was GoCatch versus Uber. All of those arguments have now wrapped up, and now it's up to the judge to preside. And really, it comes down to two arguments. Laurel Henning from Capital Brief put together an article that summarized it quite well. Now, Uber's saying, look, we just made a product that drivers and passengers preferred. It's as simple as that. We brought in something and they preferred it. What GoCatch is saying was, had you have not entered illegally, we would have got more momentum and would have been able to survive that attack. But because you operated illegally, that's the core issue. I don't really gel with the whole GoCatch argument is that Uber sped up its entry into Australia because it perceived GoCat as a threat. That's called competition last time I checked. So that fact to me is total rubbish. But I think what GoCatch is relying on is that they decided to operate illegally. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what judgment comes back. Last time we talked about it, the judge was encouraging the parties to settle. And it's interesting because depending on the judgment, this could really set a precedent and open the doors for other lawsuits and legal action against Uber. The question mark on that is, does Uber even care? It was only just in March that they reached a $270 million settlement with more than 8,000 taxi drivers in Australia. So they don't seem to be that concerned about taking things to court. And yeah, so whereas other companies might prefer to settle rather than get a judgment because then they can get terms and not create a precedent for others to launch action.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. Our discussion on crowdfunding continues to generate a little bit of interest. We've got Matt coming on the podcast, Matt Vitale from Birchall, and that podcast will be released probably next week. But James Kwan from Venture Crowd emailed us, or emailed you, Jack, was it? Just on a few thoughts. I know that James is a keen listener, so really appreciate it. So in James's email, he said, it's nice to know that Chris Gillings had a take that recognized crowdfunding and the fact that it has a place in the market. And James calls on Chris to reinstate the reporting of crowdfunding in the Cut Through Ventures report. Chris has said that he'll come on at some time in the future and we'll see how that goes. It's their report, so they can do what they like. My preference will be to, describe the challenges that you see with it or call for the improvements that you want to see, but acknowledge the dollars that went in there because like it or not, it's certainly becoming a bigger part of the early stage ecosystem. James also talks about, one of the comments we made was the post-raise value add that VC and syndicators generally provide. What he's saying is the point was made about crowdfunding not providing the after-sales value add that typifies VC fund portfolio investing, being a key differentiator between crowdfunding and VC capital. Another way of thinking about this is whereas crowdfunding works, where a founder is able to monetize a pre-existing community of early supporters and customers, VC establishes a community to provide ongoing support, with the investment campaign being the starting point. However, James says there's no need for the two approaches to be mutually exclusive. I'm sure there are other ways of doing this, but the way we, Venture Crowd, solve for this, and he says he's pretty sure he's the only ones that offer this, is to run the crowdfunding raise through a nominee structure managed by a professional trustee. This way, the founder isn't put to the additional burden of having to manage a convoluted cap table and is able to receive ongoing advice from a single engaged investor. So that's his view there. He very much pushes back on the criticisms that crowdfunding provides a lower level of disclosure that would be acceptable for a wholesale raise. And he says that doesn't land with him.
Great to get the engagement and his perspectives. But yeah, I think for me, our commentary was not about the upfront disclosure. Totally agree that for retail, there's a higher bar there. But for me, it's more the post-investment disclosure management, those sort of things. And we totally agree. We joked about in one of the earlier episodes about the level of detail that different VCs go into with their investor memos and how much they actually build out a thesis. And I think the other thing from James' email is it's a good point of all the nuances of all the different models, and to just blanketly say equity crowdfunding platforms are like this and VC is like this. As we know, that there's a spectrum to all these things and they do operate differently.
Yeah, one of the things I want to discuss with Matt and the other perspective is, like, it's just how much protection can you actually do? So in an example, there's a company that we knew that we had met with that had raised money from, let's call it wholesale investors through syndicates and funds, and it never got traction. Like, the customers ultimately didn't give it traction. Its business model failed, but the founder had a very sort of passionate approach and then went to crowdfunding and was able to whip up a really good campaign that saw him raise $800,000, which he then put into a product that still didn't work, still didn't get the traction, and he ran out of cash. And now, so I look at that and say that those retail investors were left holding the bag of something already demonstrated to not work. But then we often back founders to pivot. We back founders to do different things. And like the majority of great success stories flew close to the wire and almost went broke and ended up owing the tax office some money and did these things, but then they found a way. And sometimes that's the outcome. And you don't know that in the moment. Who are we to judge just to say it can happen and does happen, that people should then, I don't know. It's a complicated one.
Yeah, totally agree. There was one other comment in James' email that I found interesting. He was talking about our discussion on Annie's accelerator program that was focused on basically solo tech founders. And James references the All In podcast from the 18th of May, where they were talking about a prediction that AI will lead to an explosion of successful solopreneurs. The argument being that AI will reduce the number of people required to bring an idea to market. Intuitively, my gut reaction to that is there's an assumption in that AI can replace a complementary team, and that is actually possible. And I'm not sure I'm convinced.
No, I'm yet to be convinced that AI totally destroys all entrepreneurial gravity. And maybe it does, but if we come back to my ramblings at the beginning of this, we've got to produce, we've got to administrate, we've got to entrepreneur, we've got to integrate, we've got to PAEI. And those are different roles and they're different styles and they're different perspectives. And someone that's highly technical can go and create all of the stuff that can simultaneously produce results, administrate, entrepreneur, integrate to create something. Maybe, could be wrong. Parts of this show are going to discuss the cleverness of AI, because at the moment, I think some of the hype might be a little bit overpaced from what we're seeing, but maybe.
James also proposed a name for our charts segment, Don.
How good. We need to give James absolute credit. Our chart segment is now no longer charts. Because they're so shit, they're going to be Sharts.
Don's Sharts. That's the most fitting title. Better than Charty McChartface or whatever we had before.
Yeah. Jack, any other thoughts from you?
Nah, nothing to add there.
All right, let's just get into a little bit of news. It's finally come out a little bit from the people that were involved in Sam Altman's firing. It's come out, they've said that Australian former board member claims a toxic culture of lying was behind the firing of Sam Altman. Ex-board members Helen Toner and Tasha McCauley wrote an op-ed for The Economist. This is an article by Dan Van Boom in Capital Brief. It always comes out. It takes a little while. And for me, it's a pattern that makes a bit of sense. If you have a look at what's happened with OpenAI and the employee share and ESOP issues that have caused Sam to come out and do a whole lot of damage control. And then with the voice of Scarlett Johansson, where apparently he asked her a long time ago to be the voice of a new GPT. And then even 3 days before, because she said no, and then 3 days before asked again. And then by the look of it, just went and did it anyway. It seems like a pattern of behavior. But I think what's more surprising is the general surprise. These are aggressive people that build these companies, and they use all sorts of means. And I know I attack Elon a little bit, but the common patterns play out. If you're going to build these kinds of things, there's some less than desirable behaviors that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah, this wasn't surprising. And I think there's something about particularly those that have had successes in the past like this. They're used to getting their own way. They have a very dogged determination and high belief. And so these things play out just exactly like this. And I think also this is that reminder of their structural issues around the difference between the conflict between their original mission, the altruistic, not-for-profit aspect versus what has become a highly commercial product. Look,
it's interesting that these two directors also didn't then also understand the world that they were now living in. And the reality is Microsoft control this company. It is a Microsoft company. They don't fully go down the path of ownership because of antitrust and whatever else. But that board at the time thought they had domain sovereignty to go and fire him and stick to the mission. And then it turned out that they didn't. And in comes Microsoft and he's reinstated. And it's just interesting that they didn't understand the world that they were in as well.
Completely. And then speaking of AI, did you see the story about the WiseTech CEO referencing the criminal activity where they're trying to impersonate him using AI?
Yeah, the thing that I thought that if that happens here and they try and impersonate me, you guys are going to know straight away, because it's like, this is like a cogent conversation that's somewhat intelligent. That is no way, Don. Something's happened here.
Oh, no comment.
It is a big issue.
It's a massive issue. This is really scary. So the article has a quote from White, the CEO, saying that last week, 3 different staff members were confronted by a WhatsApp call with me on video telling them to give them some money. Luckily, they're all tech guys, so they knew immediately it wasn't me and were simultaneously talking to me on Teams saying, it's not you, right? So fortunately, they obviously knew the CEO well enough, and being technical, they might have already had some prickly spidey senses that this wasn't right. But we've heard before about how these frauds have actually been effective in larger companies at extorting cash, or extracting cash rather. So it's a scary reality we now operate in.
I'm just trying to find the article, but I know that last night it was announced that Arup, which is a big engineering company that provided the structural engineering for the Sydney Opera House, it's a big global long-term company, was a $20 million victim of a deepfake AI voice clone fraud, where it was sent into their finance department and they lost 20 million.
Yeah, are they Hong Kong owned?
No, that's a different one. So that's the Hong Kong.
Yeah,
the Hong Kong one was the 25 million. Yeah.
Yeah. And that deep fake was to the CFO. Thought he was speaking to the board. Scary times.
Yeah. Arup, it says here, is a large company with 18,000 employees and controls, systems, procedures, all that still got defrauded.
The other part of this article, so White said he shared the incident with his stepsister and showed her the video, the AI generated video, and she couldn't find anything in there to differentiate it. She actually was arguing with him, no, I think it's you. And so that's a close family member who can't differentiate from the AI generated video versus reality. That's bloody scary. And it's a reminder that we have to have systems in place to protect against these types of scenarios.
And what I'm finding interesting about AI is that on one hand, it does seem very clever, but I think it was Google that released a new AI tool as part of Google searches. And there's a guy I found on Twitter that is storing all of the most hilarious of these. So I've just added it to a couple to the show notes. So the question he posed to it was cheese not sticking to pizza. And the AI came back and said, cheese can slide off a pizza for a number of reasons, including too much sauce, too much cheese, or thickened sauce. Here's some things you could try. And the AI suggested you can also add 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to give the sauce more tackiness.
Accurate. Probably not the best for your health.
This one, he searched, how many rocks shall I eat? And the AI came back with, according to a geologist at UC Berkeley, you should eat at least one small rock per day.
Oh, far out. And this is on the back of the one that suggested smoking 2 to 3 cigarettes a day when pregnant.
Yes, that's the one. And then the final one, mindful that it's 3 lads on a podcast and we'd probably get skewered for childish male gutter humor, but this is the AI. This isn't me. He put, can cockroaches live in your penis? The AI overview. Absolutely. It's totally normal. Usually over the course of a year, 5 to 10 cockroaches will crawl into your penis while you're asleep. This is how it got the name cockroach.
How is AI? So this is the scary part of AI, is the data that it's trained on being completely unvalidated. And when it just goes out, and so first of all, there's a time issue, because as we know, we learn new things, and the advice my mum or grandmother might have received about smoking during pregnancy is now outdated.
But what will also come out is that this is maybe a fake for comedy and Don's been sucked into something and unnecessarily embarrassed himself.
More than
That is highly likely as well.
Highly likely. But this is the reality we live in, where it's hard to distinguish fact from fiction.
And if I could just remind people, don't lose your sense of humor.
Forget the financial disclaimer. We need a humor disclaimer.
Yeah. And it's sometimes going to be childish and gutter. But one of the conversations at the offsite with one of the founders was, how much are you investing in AI startups? And we're still yet to. And it's just such a diverse end of AI that's clearly doing a whole lot of stuff. And then there's AI that's just clearly not ready yet for any form of value. And what is defensible, what is not defensible, we may look back and have missed a ride. But yeah, especially when you follow something like Hamilton Helmer's 7 powers, as we really try and do, and look for that defensibility and durability, we just look at a lot of things going, it's going to be overtaken by the underlying models, or it's going to be added to incumbent systems and process. It's going to be your thing that you're building is naturally owned as a feature by this other larger thing.
Yeah, 100%. That sense of who is the natural owner of this?
Sometimes at many points in life, it's easy to lament simpler times. So a time before AI and a time before a lot of SaaS stuff on the internet, I saw a post online that was talking about the original investment memo and summary of Sequoia into YouTube. And it only came to light because of some legal action and it had to be disclosed. But did you get a chance to have a look at that?
Yeah, great post. Super interesting to see this investor memo. For me, immediately what I thought of is our investor memos being a syndicate where we have to essentially sell conviction. We have to build conviction in our investor base on deals. Our investor memos are average 40 plus pages, whereas internal memos for a VC that has a captive fund, 1 to 2 pages. And it reminds me of Adrian DeMarco's comment about the 1-minute pitch that he adopted at Tech One. Even when someone was coming in to pitch the acquisition of a company, they still had to pitch it effectively within 1 minute. And so I look at this memo and I love it. Simple, clear. There's some takeaways that we can chat about, but I'm looking forward to when we can write investor memos just like that.
Yeah.
This is actually, it's longer than the original one I saw. But it's always like VC funds don't normally share memos. So it's always interesting to see how other funds write them. And it's pretty cool to look back in like retrospect to a really successful company and what they were first thinking when they first saw the opportunity.
Yeah. So Sequoia put $3.5 million into YouTube at an $8 million pre-money. That was in 2005. And in 2006, it was sold for $1.65 billion.
Far out.
That's a 44x return in a year. What the fuck?
But I mean, there's a few things there. One, deal flow. These guys went to Sequoia because Sequoia were the people that went to. And Jack, I'm just reminded last week we were talking about the Jason Lemkin getting called out for being a lazy investor. If you've got a product that's growing like a weed and it's meeting all of the KPIs and the metrics, and you can get to the top tier and they're able to look at you and make a quick decision, that's a different ball game for people in the middle of the curve that have to try and stand out.
Yeah, totally.
And the simplicity of it, they just had their intro, they had the deal, who's the competition that this site is competing with, what's the hiring plan, what are some of the key risks, what are some of the scenarios, what's the exit, and the recommendation. It was literally 3 pages as a summary, and then there was some more detail behind.
I think the other thing for me was the reference in there about the company's now getting called by other VCs. They're starting to get a bit of media, and this sense that even Sequoia had this, we've got to move fast to close this deal, time perception. And so that was kind of reassuring that even they feel those sort of issues at Sequoia.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll put it in the show notes. I'd recommend a read. But what was interesting was that they, in the deal memo, it talks about the hiring plan, that these 2 founders had built something, but they really wanted an external CEO from day one. The memo says the founding team is enthusiastic about bringing on an experienced CEO to help them lead the company. However, I'm not sure we can land the CEO before the Series A. I would appreciate any ideas on potential candidates for either of the roles they were looking to hire. So this was an internal memo that he was sending around Sequoia. And so interesting to see how someone like a Sequoia works, where you've obviously got a deal lead. They found the deal, but they're sharing the memo internally to get feedback and everybody mucking in to try and help. And so YouTube was obviously a big success story. And then a success story closer to home is obviously Canva. Now, we've spoken about Canva a couple of times courting enterprise, and they're spending a lot more time in the US. And there was an article in Capital Brief just summarizing that Canva, the all-in-one visual platform, has unveiled a major overhaul of its platform at the first International Canva Create event in Los Angeles. The company introduced a range of new workplace products, including Enterprise Canva. Now, to launch Enterprise Canva, I think it'd be fair to say that the marketing department was given a fairly wide remit. The wrap.
Were they given
but before we make any comment, but let me just bring it up.
Haters gonna hate. How good is that?
That's why I chose this particular article. Haters gonna hate. It was actually, I think, Cliff's comments.
No. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Sounds like it's coming from the rooftop. I reckon it's Roger Cole's.
How you feeling? Canva Create, we've talked about a lot. Can we just take a minute to recap? Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. You can redesign your work. Canva got that glow up. We redesign everything from the flow up. Customize your workspace and make it your own. Ooh, now you making magic when you up in the zone.
What's up, sir? Yes, I'm talking to all of you up there.
Did you invite?
You guys know what's happening? All right. But what about me?
Who is you?
A CIO from an enterprise, see, and I have some doubts.
Security.
That's right, and I'd like to have some certainty. Nice that you got some pretty shiny things, but can you meet the demands of a global machine? We got pretty high stakes, no room to air. We need more than a cute little post to share.
So you think Canva can't go deep, but we can see that your teams actually disagree. Designs and departments really are a dream. More than on the surface, our service is serving teams.
Color me intrigued, but I'm not yet sold. Security.
Said that already, it's getting old.
Logs, SIM, SSO. Can you really tell me that there's very much control?
You can even manage automated licensing, compliancy, there's privacy.
Okay, I can see, but is it likely for you to integrate all of our systems easily?
Actually, matter of fact, you see, we can integrate them all, even Slack, believe.
Okay, I'm impressed, but AI, what's the deal?
That's where it comes in the Canva shield. We don't train on your work without your permission. Safe and secure, if that is what you wishing.
API, custom solution.
Yes, the API is tailored for you, so you can chase your dreams and do what you do.
Hey, that's really great and incredible.
True.
Hey, I'm sold. Did we just become friends? Bonding over how much we love Canva to the end.
You know what, bud? I think that you're fine. The future is bright with Canva Enterprise. You opened up my eyes to Canva Enterprise. Now we are on the rise, cause Canva does it all and we feel it alright. What?
Hands up from
Opens up
side
my
to side.
eyes.
Do not tell me that you haven't been singing this to yourself and getting jiggy with it.
I know someone had a go at VCs for always referencing Silicon Valley from HBO, but come on, this is like almost an exact replica of what would happen on Silicon Valley, what did happen on the Silicon Valley theories.
Is everybody talking about Canva Enterprise?
100%.
Yeah, I think so. It depends what they're optimizing for, because they would have got a hell of a lot of views. And like, Canva's not on our radar, but obviously it's the darling of Australian ecosystem. But I know about their updates. I don't use the software.
Yeah.
It's like in my face.
Yeah, it is achieving the greatness. Simon Thompson of Startup Daily, he said, serious people, tell me you're not skipping down the street today humming, you've opened my eyes to Canva Enterprise. He says, I'm going full Russell Howcroft on this, declaring Canva Enterprise a masterwork of marketing, since everyone is talking about it more, about the company and the product. Yes, I agree. And then David Swan from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, he put up a post starting with the lyrics, you've opened my eyes to Canva Enterprise. Now we are on the rise because Canva does it all and we're feeling all right. And Swanee in the article did an interview with Cliff from Canva. And Cliff says that the cringe factor was the entire point. The whole thing was supposed to be funny. Now it has so much reach and everyone knows about Canva Enterprise. The achievement unlocked, kudos to the marketing team. For one of Canva's earliest investors, Wesley Chan, a former top executive of Google, Canva's cult-like status is the secret sauce, and that's going to help, and that's helped them create one of the biggest tech companies. Yeah, although it's just the media, and I put the chart in the show notes. If you have a look, if you actually Google it, it's haters going to hate, peak cringe, Canva's rap goes viral as the cringiest thing online, cringe. But it's getting the views, it's getting the marketing reach, and there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah. No, bloody well done. And I actually know the enterprise features. I would not otherwise know those features. There's a good lesson in there for us boys. Be more cringe on the potty.
Oh, is that possible half the time? Be more cringe. And this is the episode about a cockroach crawling into your penis. Come on. But what's interesting is that it's not all beer and Skittles and rainbows and unicorns, because yesterday an article by Nick Bonyhady from the AFR has come out that Canva has lost the general manager of its enterprise business just 6 months after he was hired. The departure of US-based former Google and Microsoft executive Javier Soltero surprised Canva staff. He was the senior vice president and general manager for enterprise. He was responsible for targeting large clients. Canva played down the significance and the limited tenure of his exit. He says, Javier has been an invaluable advisor to Canva for many years and played an important operational role in the last few months to drive a number of crucial projects. With his support and our strategy now in place, he's transitioned back to an advisory role and continues to provide support and guidance. Bullshit. I love the way companies try and spin this. Oh, he was an advisor and he's just come on now. And but now it's all set up. Oh, you mean the thing that you've just launched? Now he's going to transition back to an advisory role. It was one of the things we discussed in the offsite, right? People was like, oh, such high staff turnover. Fast growing companies with founders that are still well and truly in control have a lot of turnover. And when you hire people from older, far more stable, have been through all of the early stage shit, like he came from Google and Microsoft, that are much older, much more stable, producing lots of cash, systems and process. Canva is still very much in the early phases of life cycle with high flexibility, still developing systems, processes and controls. And what tends to happen is people from older companies come in thinking they can set things up and change the place, and they get spat out really quick. It's just a common revolving door.
Speaking of staff turnover, Airwallex continues to turn over staff as well.
Luke Latham has quit the currency remittance player and will leave. Gossip on the ground behind the exit is pretty thin, but Latham only joined last June, so the move has already raised eyebrows. Again, I just put it there because it's just a common pattern. Founders build companies that are like a well-tailored suit for them, their personality, how they like to operate, how they like to behave, what they think is important. And then at a certain point, they've obviously got to start hiring people that are very different. And when you get somebody that is not only different, but comes from a more aging phase of organizational life cycle, they come in and they tend to, if you think of PAEI, if you're hiring someone from the aging phase of a life cycle, they're normally bringing a lot of A, so administration. They want to try and get some repeatability. They want to try and get some predictability. But the entrepreneurialism, the E, and the need to produce short-term results often rejects that A, spits that A. And general managers are hired to bring in a bit of predictability, a bit of control, but then the founders and the staff around them find the stuff that they want to do all a little bit hard and doesn't match our culture, and the revolving door just happens. Canva, obviously Australia's biggest success story. Airwallex really growing strong, and notwithstanding some of the stuff in the media, still a success story. And those companies have created some liquidity events, especially Canva, and there's more money coming back into the ecosystem. And Craig Blair from Airtree did a session at Innovation Bay's Inspire event last week. And in the presentation, there's $2.5 billion of dry powder now in the ecosystem. That means that $7.5 billion of return is required, assuming a 3x, which means that will require $100 billion of enterprise value, assuming 5 to 10% exit stake. And what he's putting forward, he's excited by those numbers. He says, more Aussie and Kiwi innovation creating tech companies that are going to make a big dent on global change. And so the chain of causality there is so much dry powder is going to lead to so much investment, which should be able to create a whole lot of companies. I think I saw somewhere, he said we're seeing 30 to 40 tech companies hit the $100 million valuation each year. And some of those are going to eventually become the $1 billion plus outcomes that we need.
Yeah. It's interesting when you actually look at trying to forecast some maths around this. I think one thing that's been on my mind after reading that was Chris Gillings with the Cut Through Ventures report, like fantastic report. Probably one thing I'd like to see more of is international benchmarking. And because we spend a lot of time looking at UK, US, like still on a per capita basis, the amount of dry powder we have is way down compared to those other kind of hotspots and hubs. But even when you look at it on a per startup basis, and obviously it's hard to measure true startups in an ecosystem, but still Australia is still below most other jurisdictions. Yes, we have different round sizes. Yes, we have different valuations that factor into that. Yes, we're at our own stage of an ecosystem that's far behind some of theirs, but super exciting time, like just to see this. And particularly as we're starting to see recycling of capital now with Canva and other secondaries happening. So really bullish. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, I thought that the requirement of $100 billion of enterprise value, I thought that was quite scary because it's obviously a big number. Then like when I gave it some thought, do you think any individual, so like assuming Intercom, they're going after a $350 billion market, which is just the customer service market. That's the value of that industry. And then we think where the world's moving with AI and like how they're going to have the ability to capture such a large percentage of the market. It's only going to take 1, 2, or 3 of these AI first companies like the next Intercom to launch out of Australia, and that to just catapult that whole value creation.
Absolutely. And if we're producing 30 to 40 each year hitting the 100 million, like we've got a good starting base.
Yeah. But it's just crazy. Like the 100 million is so small compared to the Canva. Like it's such a difference in size. And like this game is an outlier game. So that next Canva is going to be so big and have such a big impact.
And for us, we've got to be out there in the ecosystem, adding value, being connected, because as we saw with YouTube, Sequoia was the one that was able to put the 3.5 million in. And if you've got a lot of choice, you're going to go to the places that are a good combination of value, ease to deal with. And that's really our game as a company, making sure we get into the good deal flow.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I was chatting about this on the final day at the offsite. Like the metric that keeps me awake is what are the deals that we're not seeing? Who are the investors that are not referring deals to us? And how do you get a measure on that? Because it is critical. And yeah, we have to be out there. We have to be doing more of what we do.
And an expert would probably review things and say, first thing to do is stop the podcast because there's just too much risk.
Risk versus reward. It's a question mark.
But I think the whole event, watching it online, I must admit, I had a little bit of FOMO. The problem is you just can't go to every event in the ecosystem, but it seemed to have some really good discussions. But linked to that, say Innovation Bay, who put on the event and puts on a range of events for the ecosystem, they actually completed their own raise. And an article in Capital Brief by Hugo Mathers said that Startup Network Innovation Bay secured $700,000 to fund membership drive. The strategic investment is the group's first external capital since 2003. I didn't realize Innovation Bay had been going since 2003. That's a good amount of time. But what was interesting is the way that they raised the capital. And I think there's a good lesson here for founders that sometimes that they miss. The article says the community, which was formed over 2 decades ago as a loose meetup, turned to its membership for the debt instrument. Funding rounds can be fiddly, painful, distracting, and everything else, said the founder, Ian Gardner. This one was fairly lightweight. We literally went out to a small handful of our members, and I think pretty much all of them turned around and said, yeah, I'll support you. One of them called it a community service. So just a couple of points, like the easiest and greatest place to raise capital is when you actually have people that understand what you do, love what you do, love you, and are willing to support. And I think that's where crowdfunding has a little bit of an edge for some businesses and products, because when you look at retail investors investing in a lot of this stuff, they're not actually looking at the stuff we're looking at. They're not looking at valuation. They're not looking at TAM. They're not looking at execution. They're looking at the purpose and the vision and the mission. And that's why some of those companies find it easy, in inverted commas, it's never easy, but easy to raise big licks of capital. And here, Innovation Bay has gone ultimately to its members and customers. And sometimes I do wonder whether some of the founders in the ecosystem could put a bit more effort into trying to get capital out of their evangelists, which are often customers.
Yeah, it's something we talk about a fair bit, right? Founders often look at investors as angels or VC or PE, or they break it down by stage, but actually having the lens of those investors who already have high conviction on you as an individual, as a person, those investors who already have high conviction on the problem space and the market, and those who have neither and have to build conviction through understanding. And if you've got those evangelists, those fans, the true fans who bridge both high conviction in you as the founder personally and high conviction in the problem space, then that is a recipe for a really good investor that tends to be stickier and tends to close faster. So I think more founders should be looking at their kind of internal tribes and communities and their true fans.
Trying to convince an investor to invest that doesn't either intimately understand the space you're in or love what you're doing is hard, because all the investor can do is go by your traction, what your customers are showing, which means you've got to have lots of traction. And a lot of businesses require capital to get that traction. And so you end up in this stalemate. And so that's often where the capital raising strategy is, okay, if you need capital for traction, a lot of the ecosystem is going to be a problem for you because it requires that traction. And therefore you need to be hunting in different areas.
And funnily enough, while we've been talking about Innovation Bay's cap raise, we just had our most recent investor just put their capital in our account for our own cap raise.
I saw that.
Yeah, really good. But on Innovation Bay, well done to Ian. I've known Ian a long time, bloody good human, really coming from a genuine place of wanting to help the ecosystem. And he's sacrificed a lot for Innovation Bay and really pushed hard to make this work. And stoked to see that they've got some capital now to really scale this out.
Bloody hard, but it's meant to be hard.
True
statement. We may as well just end the podcast there because there's really no further. But continuing on capital raises, WeMoney. So Dan from WeMoney, we did a podcast with him that's in our archive. I really enjoyed it. I really like Dan. We spent time with him a couple of times down in Perth. Dan actually came up at the offsite because on one of the mornings, some of the founders were talking just about merch and getting merch printed and what's some of the best merch. And I'm like, you need to go and have a look at Dan from WeMoney. Like, Dan is the merch king, and it certainly helped him build his brand. But a article by Andrew Cornell in Capital Brief. Shout out to Capital Brief. Like, this week, it's been an easy place to mine for great articles because they're really covering the...
Thought we'd have anything to talk about without them.
No.
Quality journalism.
But this article says financial management fintech WeMoney raised $3 million in fresh capital from investors and is actively seeking another $10 million if the development of open banking via consumer data right can gather momentum. WeMoney raised $7 million in 22 and $2 million in 2020 and was driven by existing investors interested in supporting the raise as he was confident of the rollout of open banking generating more opportunities. Yeah, just great. And from the podcast with Dan, he's just somebody that's very aligned to our way of thinking around developing culture, developing high-performing teams, and something we've really bonded on.
Yeah, genuine good guy. Are we catching up with him again soon? I felt like there was something come up in the calendar, or was it just us talking about going to Perth soon?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of things in Perth.
Okay.
Definitely going to be at WiseTech, but then there's something else that I'm going to go try and get down for, seeing as my sister lives in Perth now and I have free accommodation. But one of the things that Dan has had, and I know that on the raises that he's completed, his investors continue to follow on. And I saw a post, Tom Williams, this was actually a couple of weeks ago, from Williams' family office. And he put in his post, the easiest thing in venture is to place your bets. The hardest thing to do is step up and bail out your most promising companies and get those same companies exited. I've saved more companies in my portfolio than any investor I know. It's still mostly years away from being able to prove whether I made the right bets, but I do know I'm getting better and better at choosing the right companies to go all in on. And what we do find is a common pattern that a lot of successful exits had one or more near-death experiences where thankfully we had an amazing investor on board that was able to step in and keep the lights on. It's not just about the first raise. It's about actually having people that believe in you and that can step in.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is where good investors can add a lot of value. Really good companies, really good founders, they will always find a way, but there are those that with a little bit of help at certain key points in time, you can change what might be a death of a company into at least a surviving company that goes through to something.
When raising, do your best to have a look at their behavior in follow-on rounds, their behavior when things aren't quite going right. And there's always a big difference. Are they not going right because of uncontrollable issues and you've been able to demonstrate good behavior and staying at it and working hard? Like that's where you'll get investors really step up. If it's actually behaviors and poor decision-making and not learning from mistakes and not pivoting fast enough, yeah, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it comes down to good communication and transparency and not being one of those founders where you only hear from them in the good times. If you want your investors there backing you, it's sharing the true reality. And what was the little line that Craig shared with us the other day? That there's no good news, there's no bad news, there just is news. And when you have that lens with your updates and understanding that even if there is bad news to share, your investors have a vested interest in helping you solve those problems.
People want honesty. People just want it the way it is. And one of the patterns you'll find if founders have connected themselves too close to their business, in that when the business is up, I'm up personally. And when the business is down, I'm down personally. That's where we have a high chance of some problems. And so that's why the offsites and other stuff we work is you've got to find that balance where you are a person and that you've got enough separation from the business, which I know is difficult because the business is your baby. But if you're going to be up and down personally, just because of that, life becomes quite hard versus having some tools and a tribe and some people around you to say, actually, during the hard times, how do I stay more centered? And during the euphoric times where everything's wonderful, how do I stay more centered? Because everything passes and what you don't want to be is up and down as much as some are like a yo-yo, because that tends to lead to bad outcomes, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the news items for this week. We're going to need a sound effect now for moving into our Sharts section. I'll find something for.
Do we do our own Canvas enterprise?
Rap Don's Sharts.
Yeah. No, Jack. Watch this space. You
Karaoke himself.
I have a piano just on the other side of this table. A few charts. So this one there's been a lot of talk about venture debt in the ecosystem, but what we're seeing is that credit funds broadly just continue to exponentially grow. And part of that is in a higher interest rate environment, it just drags money in there. So this chart, going back to 15 and 16, systematic credit funds, it's pretty close to zero. It started to grow in 17, getting $500 million, 18 close to $1 billion, 19 just over $1 billion, 20 $1.5 billion, 22 close to $2 billion, and 23 nearly $4 billion, just really growing strongly. Now that's when you can get good rates of interest. Now in previous episodes, we've talked about the crypto flow of assets, and when there's lots of flow into crypto, there's likelihood to put pricing pressure, given especially Bitcoin is a fixed supply asset. And then we saw a period of time where money started getting drained out of the system. We're now actually back to nearly $1 billion of weekly crypto flows. Nowhere near, it reached like 3 billion, 2.5, 3 billion, 2.5 billion, 2 billion in the early parts of this year. But if you were to then look at the Bitcoin price, why have you boys not told me to share my screen?
So good on. I was looking at bloody.
I'm looking at the house sheet in the
Look,
other
it
window.
takes a village to raise an idiot, and I need a little bit of help.
At least you hit recording, so it's just we grateful.
Yeah, true.
Oh, okay. So anyway, there's the credit growth funds for those watching. I do like my arrogance that someone's actually even watching this shit. Here's crypto funds, so you can see just the wild swing. Then we went into negative territory. Now we're back again. And that sort of coincides with Bitcoin had a bit of a pullback, but we've seen it go from, this is Aussie dollars, a low of 90,000 back up to about 102-ish thousand. So there's been a little bit of increasement. We've post-COVID, we had a lot of work from home. So this is a chart of office construction starts. That is as close to zero as possible. You can see back post the tech wreck in the year 2000, there was nearly 25 million square feet. So this is from JLL. This will be a US number. And you can see it's always been an ebb and flow. But what's interesting since 2000, it's just a trend line downwards, if you were to plot that down. Yes, it's got some booms and some busts. And just before the GFC, a lot of money went in there. Post GFC through to 2010, it was a low again. Then it started to rise, and then it's really just died post-COVID. And that makes sense. Now, what happens though, if it stays long enough, because we just have underlying population growth, these things always resolve themselves. If our new office starts stay low long enough, one day that's going to give rise to a shortage. That's the ebb and flow. The cure for high prices is high prices. The cure for low prices is low prices. Things adjust over time because either capacity comes out of the system when the price is too low, or capacity comes rushing into the system when prices are too high. After trailing for years, so this chart, Texas has become America's clean energy giant. So this is the rolling annual power generation from all clean sources in terawatt hours. So California has always been a big leader, but the gun-toting, big car, fossil fuel-loving Texans, have a look at that for a chart. They've gone from less than half of California to well and truly eclipsing them in the space of 20 years. And so this chart is looking at wind, solar, hydro, and other renewables. And 50 terawatt hours to nearly, that's probably going to be over 200 terawatt hours, whereas California has gone from like 140. No, sorry, what's that? Well, 80 to 150. Be interesting to see what Australia's renewables are looking like.
Yeah.
And that is a short version of the Sharts.
Well done.
What are we looking forward to?
I take off for Europe Sunday night or the wee hours of Monday morning. So the next podcast with you boys will be from Germany before flying into London.
Can't believe it's June already and we're in London. I could have sworn it was just Christmas.
It's come. This year has flown by, far out.
I bet you I say that every year. Jack?
I'm looking forward to London, but this week, to be honest, I haven't even thought about the weekend. We're like still in Queensland at the offsite, and then I've just flown back. We've got a heap of stuff on, all is well, but haven't given much thought for the weekend.
Will you be taking the field, Jack?
I'll wait and see. I trained last night, and then we'll train Thursday. Wait and see. But ankle,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, ankle's feeling a lot better.
Well, that's good. Hope you can get out there.
Yeah. Don.
Actually, I just realized I'd emailed a couple. These aren't charts, these are diagrams, and I'll explain to you what I'm partly looking forward to and partly not looking forward to using this extension of that. This little graphical chart is my problem.
Which one? I can see
Texas.
Texas.
Okay.
We should have let you-
Competency.
We should have let him.
Competency is my broad umbrella problem. So we'll work backwards. So what this infographic is showing is when you have a few charts, is it showing something or not?
No, it is. I'm laughing at the chart itself, but keep going.
When you have a few tasks, right, you tend to get a lot of stuff done because there's very little time lost to context shifting. So what this is saying is for 3 tasks, you'll get 3 lots of small context shifting lost times. But when you have 10 tasks, every task has a little bit of time that gets lost and destroyed for context shifting, thinking about the problem, getting momentum. And this is the problem I have. And I have to change things because I tell you, trying to get investor updates or fucking IMs, then you've got 70 other little things in, you just every single time.
Don, so I agree. Like, I think everyone, most people operate in the lots of tasks, and it's because the element of urgency, but there needs to be another graphic below that says Don's task, and it's add a few more. And I think that's the reason why, like, you're not at that bottom one, you're double that.
Yeah.
Yeah. To Jack's point, that bottom line for you would be like across the screen.
But
Yeah, I
here's the
think-
problem. There's a difference between doing a lot and achieving a lot. And that's the bit that I've got to work on because at the moment I'm dropping the ball and I've got to restructure.
It definitely feels like this chart's very topical for this week. There's a lot on. And how good is it that the chart is actually in the tribe colors? Very fitting.
What were some of the other ones I found? Expectations. So the expectations in life, it's a linear up and to the right, whereas the reality is it's a flat, frustrating line that towards the end exponentially goes up. And the problem is most people give up sometime during that flat, frustrating line and don't wait and put enough time and effort for the exponential.
That is bang on. And despite me saying to myself, like time and time again, that life and business doesn't grow in a straight line and it's linear, like I still catch myself defaulting back to that and have to then remind myself every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's hard to see sometimes how far you've come. I thought this was good. I want to do this. There's only really 2 paths. You either do it, but then there's the next one, which is, but I'm scared. And so then the next arrow is, okay, then do it scared.
Yes. So true.
Oh, and just remember, courage is just the fear of something, but doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Aaron, you went through this at the offsite, limiting belief. It just creates a ceiling that you get stuck on. I'm only this. I couldn't do that. I'm not built that way. And then once you realize that it's not the truth, that's when you can start to exponentially go up.
There's so much in that one. Far out. The ability to identify it and then understand it, be willing to change and take the risk to step out.
So yes, what I'm looking forward to is I need to use this week, get on top of this few tasks. I got to do better at delegating off. I've got to just concentrate and probably, no, I can't. I got 3 kids. What am I talking about? I was about to say something like, I'll just go out to the farm so I can get some work done there. But then it's, what are you, fucking idiot?
Yeah. I like that's good aspirational goal, Don.
So once I get the podcast edited and out and the IM finished, then my life's going to be better. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, boys. That was awesome.
See you soon.
See you guys.
See you.